But clearly there are some people who think the run is over,
Mhm.
or about to be over, because I don't know if you've noticed, but shares of Berkshire Hathaway are down 12% since the beginning of May, when Warren Buffett announced that he was going to step down at the
Mm,
end of the year.
mm.
And I knew this was coming, and now seriously considering possibly adding a bit more. I think
Wow.
the thesis that Greg Abel and the investing team that's in place at Berkshire Hathaway is going to significantly underperform what Warren Buffett has done in his tenure. I just think that's wrong.
I'd like to open this week's show with three numbers from useprofit.com. The first number is 145%, and that's the performance of profit over the last 5 years, which means that had you followed our system, your portfolio would have way more than doubled. It would be up almost 2.5 fold in 5 short years. The second number is 402%. That is the performance of profit over the last 10 years, which means that your folio would have grown fivefold since 2015, which is like yesterday. And the final number I want to give you is 1,468%, which means your folio would have been a 16 bagger had you followed profit. Coincidentally, the folio is 16 years old, so had you followed profit for 16 years, your folio would be up 16-fold. Well, I'm delighted to say there's nothing like it out there. We have 3 free months at useprofit.com/MWS offer, my Wall Street offer. So useprofit.com/MWS offer to get a quarter of a year completely free of charge. On with the show. Hello everyone and welcome back to Stock Club. For over a decade, Chris Hill hosted Motley Fool, the Motley Fool Money podcast, which helped millions of investors make sense of the markets with his clarity and his wit and his insight. Some of you may have met Chris in 2024 and indeed 2023 when he hosted Horizon Live here in Dublin. Well, today, Chris is the creator and host of Money Unplugged, which is a new show that cuts through noise to deliver honest, independent, and fun takes on a subject that shapes all of our lives. So I asked Chris to join us here. Chris, I'm delighted to welcome you back to Stock Club. How have you been?
I'm well. Thank you for such a lovely introduction.
Chris, I had the honor of being a guest on your show, and afterwards I listened through I listened to half the episodes before I appeared and the rest of them after I appeared on your show. And it really is a wonderful, unique idea on the very subject that concerns every one of Stock Club's listeners. So can you tell me, how did you come up with the idea for Money Unplugged, specifically money?
So money is obviously something that we all need, and it's one of those rare topics that we all have to care about, whether we're interested in it or not. And something I've gotten more interested in as I've gotten older is our individual relationship with money. Because obviously, as investors, we have access to more information than we've ever had before, which is wonderful. It can also be a little overwhelming if you're not careful with how you manage the flow of information with your investments. But at the core of it, Emmett, every one of us is learning about money when we're young. We're learning how to deal with it as we get a little bit older. And then our lives become more complicated. Maybe we get married, maybe we start a family, all that sort of thing. And we start thinking about um, retirement. And so I thought it would be both interesting and fun, and for the audience, possibly instructive, to talk with people about their individual relationship with money, what it was like growing up, how it changed as they got older, really how they feel about it. And I've been very fortunate in that you and the other people I've had on the show are quite candid about how they feel about money. And it's not always positive, as you know. I think any investor who's ever bought a stock and watched it go down knows the feeling. That's at least one type of negative feeling around money. but it's really something I've just gotten more interested in over time. And to be clear, some of the people I've asked to come on the show have very politely told me, no, I don't want to do that because they don't want to talk about their relationship with money. And I
Mm.
completely respect that. It's very personal for all of us. But for those like you and others who have come on the show, it's been a series of revealing and fun conversations.
Well, as you said, like you ask your guests about money in the earliest stages of their lives, money growing up. On that, then, how much do early experiences actually influence the way we think about money, we engage with money, whether it makes it it's something we hold so private we're unwilling to discuss it, or something so public we're willing to flaunt it? What tell us about those early experiences from what you've deduced in the show?
So I've done about 25 interviews so far, and across those interviews, a couple of trends have emerged when it comes to this topic in particular. A lot of people grew up in homes where money wasn't really discussed. It's
Mm,
rare that I talk to someone and they say, "Oh yeah, we did talk about money a lot. We did talk about that." My parents, for many of us, it's a topic that is just not, it's like religion and politics. No, we don't, in polite society, we don't discuss that, Emmett, that sort of thing. So I
yeah.
think that's part of it. I think a lot of us are slightly hindered by the fact that it's not openly discussed when we're younger. I think everyone I've spoken with is affected in some way by what they pick up about money, whether money is discussed or not openly. They certainly pick up because children are observant and they can see how their parents are talking about money, how they, amongst themselves, what the mood in the house is like. I'm thinking right now about one of the first episodes is with Dan Pink, a best-selling
Mm,
author, brilliant guy, very curious about the world. And Dan compared the mood in his house when it came to money. He compared it to weather. He said it was like having this ever-present drizzle hanging over the house because money was tight when he was a kid, and that just sort of pervaded the mood in the house. And Dan went on to talk about how that affected him as an adult. He's not surprisingly, he's pretty conservative with money, with his investments and his approach to it. So everyone is affected in some way, some more than others, but nobody is immune from what money is like in their house when they're a child.
mm. And then there's a dotted line, I think, from childhood that runs through your schooling, maybe in your high school years. Your folks probably take most of the heavy lifting, and indeed when you go to college, if you're fortunate. And then I think most people will figure, I need a job to do the stuff I need to do. But then that dotted line makes its way into a significant partnership, whether that's a lifetime partner or marriage. So, what have you learned about your guests when it comes to money and marriage?
Just like money is important for every one of us, it is one of the biggest issues in a marriage.
Mm,
Emmett, you and I have both been married to amazing women
mhm.
for a
And
very
still
long
are, I
time.
believe, unless something happened at your side.
Still are, but I don't know. Let's I'll check back
Unless
with me
something
after the
happened
show.
here this
Hopefully.
morning that I wasn't told.
Uh, yeah, it's one of the biggest issues in marriage, and yet, based on the conversations I've had with people, it's not really discussed all that openly. There are some
Mm,
exceptions. A couple of people have told me, when I asked, to what extent did you talk with your spouse about money before getting married? Malcolm Etheridge, who's a wonderful and brilliant financial planner here in the Washington, D.C. area, told me, he said, it came up on the first date. She brought it up on the first date, and so I was happy to talk about it because this is what I do for a living. That is the exception to the rule. For most people I've spoken with, money is not really talked about. But again, similar to when we're children, the mood is picked up, the values are
mm, mm,
discerned, and I think this is something you and I talked a little bit about, Emmett, when you came on the show, that you can get a sense, if you're dating someone, you go out to dinner, you get a sense of how they treat the wait staff. You also get a sense of how they value money, what they spend their money on. the way
Mm.
that they talk about money. And so I've sort of come to the conclusion where we probably don't talk about money as openly and directly with our significant others before we get married or enter into some type of partnership as much as we should. But I think that's okay. It seems like for the most part, as long as you are getting a sense of how the other person values money, then once you move in together, you start paying bills together. Yes, there are some tactical decisions that need to be made about setting up bank accounts and all that sort of thing. Um, Linda Rotenberg is the co-founder of Endeavor, this global entrepreneurship organization. Told me this
Hmm.
great thing that she was very clear with her daughters, who are both in college. She was very clear that when they get to the point where they get serious with someone, she's a big advocate of what she calls yours, mine, and ours bank accounts. Because when she got married, she didn't want to have to look over her shoulder for every single purchase she was
Mm.
making.
Mm.
And I love that idea. I'm a big fan of that idea.
What's yours is mine, and what's mine is me own,
Yeah,
as they say.
exactly.
It's very true that it's kind of that old expression, how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you're dating somebody, there's a couple of signals that really just display your entire attitude to money. You find someone might be hyper generous, generous to a fault, and then someone who there's a padlock on their wallet and the wallet's hidden. You can kind of see this. So during your show, you usually have a speed round where you ask people about the last thing they splurged on. And I thought that was a great question because I had to struggle with that because I wouldn't say I'm a splurger, but definitely it was a thought-provoking question. Have you any favorite answers from the 25 odd shows you've done so far?
I have a couple, but before I share those, I do want to just spend a minute talking about splurging because this is something that
Mm,
hasn't really come up on the show, but it's something I've been thinking about on my own for a while, which is I think the agreed upon definition of splurging inherently involves a large amount of money.
right.
And I'm not saying that's an incorrect definition, but when I think about splurging,
Mm,
I find that I really lean into the urge part of it, and it's less about the amount of money, and it's more about the unplanned expenditure of money.
yeah.
I've had experiences where I have splurged on a breakfast sandwich because I'm just walking in my town. I go into a shop to get a cup of coffee, and that's my intention. But everything looks and smells so good that I think, oh, all right, I'm just going to splurge on a breakfast sandwich, that sort of thing. Um, so I do think splurging is also important. It is a little bit of a release valve for us. And every once in a while, we need to treat ourselves. Just like every once in a while, we need to go on a holiday. We need to take a little break from work. Every once in a while, treat yourself. Spend a little bit of money. Some of the people who share their splurges tell me about things that cost thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Um, I will say, Emmett, your splurge, when you talked about splurging on something from the estate of Freddie Mercury,
Yeah.
that was I got a bunch of text messages from family members and friends of mine who listened to the show, and their delight at your splurge. Um, they were like, "Oh, that's that was just brilliant that he did that." So, and a
Yeah.
little bit of
Yeah.
jealousy as well. Um, but one of my favorites, yeah, I'll go back to Dan Pink.
Yeah.
The episode with Dan Pink where Dan pulled out his phone. I did remind him that it was an audio only podcast and no one could see it, but he pulled out his phone to show me that he was expecting a delivery that day from a $28 purchase that he made on eBay that he was just utterly thrilled by. He um, he was buying a commemorative popcorn bucket from one of the professional hockey teams in America, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and it was the popcorn bucket was shaped like a Zamboni, which is the machine that sort of smooths out the ice between
Oh,
periods. And he was over the moon about it. He was as
so is he a
happy.
collector of ice? Is he a collector of popcorn buckets or a super fan of the team?
It was the popcorn bucket because,
Oh,
excuse me, um, I did ask him once we were done. I should have captured this on audio. I did ask him once we were done. I said, "Why didn't you buy the commemorative popcorn bucket of the local hockey team, the Washington Capitals, because
mm.
I know he's a fan." And he said, "They don't make one. It's ridiculous. I would have, but they don't make one." He was outraged that the local team didn't hit up on it. So again, splurging can just involve a few bucks and
Yeah.
bring utter delight. And so that's probably my favorite so far.
But it's probably a function of how tightly you manage your budget. So where you, I know it's a throwaway example, but if you go into a breakfast place for coffee and walk out with 20 bucks lighter, you're right, it's not quite a splurge. But if one is inclined to manage their finances to the dollar a day, that's a splurge. Where to the next person, it's like, I didn't even notice that. I do that 3, 4, 5 times a day. So it's so interesting to hear that Dan regarded a $28 or whatever it was popcorn bucket as a splurge. It's quite telling about his view of the subject of money and expenditure.
You're absolutely right that the greater your wealth, the easier it is to splurge on things, particularly things that don't cost a lot of money. I think
Mm.
part of it in Dan's case was the effort involved. He didn't just, wander
Oh
into
yeah,
a
well
shop
that's
and
true.
stumble upon this. He
Yeah.
went looking for this and he found it and he was thrilled.
So on the I suppose splurging brings regret for some people. They maybe around the year 2000 a whole bunch of people bought flat screen TVs a little too early and dropped €4,000 or dollars on a TV that just wasn't there yet. And I'm sure there were a lot of people who looked at cars in their driveway in Ireland during the Celtic Tiger and went, I should not have bought that. So you've asked people about purchases that they regret. Did any stand out in your mind as something you could actually almost hear in your guest's voice that this was a mistake that they really utterly regretted from the minute they said sold or bought?
There actually have been a couple of people who talked specifically about cars and buying
Oh,
luxury cars and
ah,
thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna treat myself and I really want this." And it becomes more trouble than it's worth, and pretty soon they get rid of that car. Um,
interesting.
so, but I think that making regrettable purchases is unavoidable. If you have money, you're gonna spend it, and
Oh,
some of the
yeah.
things just aren't gonna work out. As we've talked about before, Emmett, it's the same thing with stock investments. We all buy stocks with the bull case in mind, and
Mm,
it doesn't always work out, and when it
sure.
goes down, so, it's the old saying, "When you don't get what you want, you get experience." So I do think I've seen it in my guests' eyes when I talk with them that they make regrettable purchases and they learn from them.
Mm,
One that stands out is Joe Mager, who was an
yeah,
investor at the Motley Fool for a long time and is now the founder and managing partner of a venture capital firm, Seaplane Ventures, in Austin, Texas. And he talked about uh, going on vacation with his wife, and he had just gotten a bonus at work, so he was feeling a bit flush. And they went into some shop, and he bought a rock, and it's this fancy rock, and it was an
a
impulse
fancy one.
buy. And he got it home, and pretty quickly realized I paid way too much money for this rock, and it's now something that he sees in his house and, 'cause just like I'm sure with the
Mm,
the Freddie Mercury estate purchase, when
uh-huh.
you see it, you smile, you feel that
Yeah.
warmth inside you. When Joe sees this rock, he just shakes his head and think, "Ah, I paid too much money for that damn rock."
Self-loathing. Yeah.
I have a couple of those things in my house as well. One is in my closet where I open my closet and I see this thing just in my closet, and I thought, "Oh god, why did I spend that money? God, that was dumb.
I
I
love
need to
that. I
just
mean,
get rid of that."
was it one of those fancy rocks that are cut in half and it shows all the crystal inside, so it's something nice you can put on the table and tell people about?
No, not really, because I said, "Well, is it at least a conversation piece that it's
Yeah.
out and when people come over to the house?" He said, "No, it's just kind of off in a corner."
That now that's wild. Now that to me, yeah, that's a perfect example because when you touched on purchases that people regret and talk about stock investing, for me that's a different category. It sits in a part of your mind where you acknowledge it's not a material object designed to bring you joy. And I think anyone who buys a fancy car as a status symbol is ultimately going to regret it. Whereas those who love cars, like my best friend Philip, he bought a fast one, he bought a classic one, he bought a green one, he bought one without a lid. He bought like all these different cars, and every time he's excited. Um, and but if I made those purchases, as much as I appreciate how lovely each of those cars are, I would regret it immediately because I'm not a car guy. I mean, I want a car that works, but you got to love what it is that you've bought from the outset. So Joe should have arrived at that shop looking for the perfect rock. I'm here for rock. Do you have any? Well, sir, you've come to the right place. It's the Rock
What a
Emporium of
coincidence, sir.
Nevada.
Step right
Yeah.
in. No, you're absolutely right, and I think you touched on something which is so important when it comes to both investing and spending money.
Mm,
And with investing, it's just knowing your circle of competence. It took me a little while to figure out that for me as an investor, I need to stick to investing in companies that I understand how the business works because I'm just going to sleep better at night,
right.
whether the
Right.
investment does well or not. And that
Yeah.
took me a while to figure out. And I think with spending money, it's not so much, well, should I buy a fancy car because society tells me, well, that's what people who are flush do with their money? Or do I actually like fancy cars? So
Mm,
learning to spend money on the things that actually matter to us, actually bring us pleasure, that we'll
yeah.
appreciate, whether our friends can appreciate them or not.
For sure. So that's a perfect segue into a question I almost always ask our guests, which is what are your three favorite investments to buy now, today, end of July 2025, and hold forever? That notional time, which doesn't exist because we're finite creatures. But what are your three favorite things? Now, that could be a casket of wine, it could be whatever. What are your three favorite investments right now?
So I am fortunate in many ways, one of which is I've been investing for long enough that I have enough stocks in my portfolio that I would feel comfortable buying more shares of today and just holding them forever. But in thinking about your question, Emmett, I decided to take the route of finding investments of different sizes, just the overall worth of the business. And I inadvertently stumbled upon three companies that create a mnemonic device for your audience. These are companies that are literally A, B, and C. So the
Great.
A is Axon Enterprise.
Oh,
The ticker is AXON. It's a company that's about $58 billion in value. For those unfamiliar, this is the company that used to be called Taser. They specialize in non-lethal weapons and law enforcement systems. And it's one of those businesses that I want to see succeed, not just because I'm a shareholder, but because I think it's a business that can provide a public safety, again, with non lethal technology. And it's $58 billion in market cap. So
mm,
it's not the biggest company in the world. It still has room to grow. And it's one I've owned shares of for a number of years and will continue to.
same. And I also am a shareholder. And interestingly, fast fact, I interviewed the founder of Taser and then Exxon, I mean, say Axon here on the show many moons ago. And uh, fast fact, interesting fun fact, Taser is named after him, the Tom A. Smith electric rifle, TASER. So I interviewed Tom Smith on the show, and that's how Taser got its name.
I did not know that's how Taser got its name. So thank you for that nugget. Um,
So that's A. I could not agree more. And it very possibly would be one of my desert island stocks as well. And is a share I bought in Horizon and is doing very well. It's up two or threefold. So tell me, what's your B?
B is Berkshire Hathaway, which
Ah, I
is
should have guessed.
sitting pretty at a market cap of $1 trillion.
Yeah,
However,
yeah,
shares are
not bad.
not bad. It's been a good run. But clearly there are some people who think the run is over,
Hmm.
or about to be over because I don't know if you've noticed, but shares of Berkshire Hathaway are down 12% since the beginning of May when Warren Buffett announced that he was going to step down at the
Mm,
end of the year.
mm,
And I knew this was coming. And Emmet, I think I can count on one hand the number of significant predictions about stocks that I've been right about. But I've been saying for a couple of years now, Buffett's going to announce he's leaving at some point. And when that happens, the stock is going to drop. And when it drops, I'm going to buy more. And so the Monday after the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, shares fell 5%. And I added a bit to my portfolio.
well done. Well
Um,
done.
and I am, now seriously considering possibly adding a bit more. I think
Wow.
the thesis that Greg Abel and the investing team that's in place at Berkshire Hathaway is going to significantly underperform what Warren Buffett has done in his tenure. I just think that's wrong. I understand the people who say, well, look, Warren Buffett gets the quote unquote, the Warren Buffett discount when he's making deals. I suppose that's true to some extent, but I think that the amount of cash that Berkshire Hathaway has on the balance sheet at the moment will enable Greg Abel and his team to get some deals of their own if they want. I also think that Buffett is pretty dogmatic when it comes to valuation and acquisitions. And I believe in Warren Buffett's mind, there is no difference between, if they're looking at an acquisition and he has a price in mind and the seller wants 2% more. I think in Buffett's mind, he sees no difference between they want 2% more than I'm willing to pay versus they want 50% more.
Oh,
Right.
entirely. He
Yeah.
said that repeatedly.
Yeah.
There's the deal. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. And I think that, again, because of the cash they have on the balance sheet, my hunch is that Greg Abel
Mm.
is going to be less dogmatic when it comes to acquisition. So anyway,
Oh, interesting.
I think
Very
Berkshire Hathaway
interesting.
is set up to continue to run in a stock appreciating way for many
And
years
it's
to come.
even though it's now a name known to everybody who listens to this show and anyone who's invested in the stock market, it's funny to think that even in the 90s, they were virtually unheard of. Like it was kind of Berkshire Who now? It was
Yes.
just another fund. Okay, so let's hit me with the C. What's your C?
C is a stock that came up late 2024 at the Horizon Live event.
Oh,
And in the
can I
wake
guess?
of that event, I bought
Mm.
shares of CRISPR Therapeutics.
Ah,
Uh,
good. Well, I'm glad it's done well before you got on the show. It's been on a bit of a run in the last
it
couple of
has been
weeks.
on a bit of a run, but even
Mhm.
after I bought it, shares fell about 20%.
Yeah,
And I'm sure your audience is familiar with CRISPR, the gene editing technology company. Market
oh,
cap
for
at the
sure.
moment is about $5.5 billion. And
Mhm.
uh, again, this even more so than Axon Enterprise, this is a company that I am very much rooting for the technology. I'm very much
Oh, yeah.
rooting for this therapy to do good in the future. And they're one of the leaders. I think they will continue to be so. I also think that this is one of those things that just has the ability to run for
Mm,
decades.
mhm.
And um, I want to be very clear. I was adding nothing to the conversation at Horizon Live. I was merely listening as you and Bill, Mann, and Mike were talking about CRISPR, and to the point where a couple of people came up to me after the event and said, "Boy, that was fascinating." And I said, "I know. I was sitting right up there on the stage, and I couldn't have been more interested in what they were saying about CRISPR therapeutics."
I'm really delighted to hear that because I'm such a believer, and I've spent this year so far reading quite extensively on the subject because it's really, really complex. And we had a show about CRISPR, a couple of shows, I'm sure, on Stock Club. But I was reading in New Scientist only yesterday that scientists have successfully used CRISPR to remove the extra chromosome that causes Down's syndrome in human cells. And this is, as you can imagine, a technology or breakthrough, whatever the right word is, that was unimaginable, perhaps until you just heard those words come out of my mouth right now. Like, can you imagine? And it's a 2025 study that it was led by a Japanese guy whose name I've completely forgotten, and his colleagues in a university in Japan. And they used modified CRISPR-Cas9 to target and cut the extra copy of the chromosome 21 in a lab grown human cells. All of that is to say, we are going to see things in our lives that are goosebumps moment as a consequence of CRISPR. So I love those three choices. I am a shareholder in Axon. I used to be a shareholder in Berkshire, but sold it too many years ago because I figured Warren and Charlie were nearly done. I'm talking, I'm talking 20 years ago. And then I'm a big fan of CRISPR as a movement. Three wonderful stocks. I heard you're in the recording studio these days, Chris. I heard on the grapevine. Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm quite sure our audience would be very interested.
I will be heading into the studio later this month to record the audio version of Morgan Housel's forthcoming book, The Art of Spending Money. It comes out in early October of this year. I had the pleasure of narrating Morgan's first two books, The Psychology of
Mhm.
Money and his follow-up, Same as Ever. And he asked me to do this next one. And I've read the book. It is eye-opening. It
Really?
is the phrase I will use.
Wow.
It is eye-opening in the ways that let me put it this way. I felt reading this book the way I felt reading The Psychology of Money for the first time.
Mhm.
And I read that in, I believe it was March of 2020 when Morgan dropped off the first copy of it because it was going to come out in September. And I got about a third of the way through that book, and I thought, oh my God, this is brilliant, and just sort of opening up my eyes to new ways of thinking about money, and in this case, new ways of thinking about spending money. So it's a wonderful book. I'm very excited for Morgan, and I'm looking forward to getting into the studio.
Oh, that's wonderful. So the art of spending money, has it influenced, or do you think it will influence how you spend money? I don't know anything about the book, but the title says enough for me to ask the question.
Yes, it absolutely
Mm,
will influence
wow.
the way I spend money
Wow.
because not to give too much away, but the part of what he gets at is something you and I have talked a little bit about today, Emmett, and it's highly personal, and spending money on the things that matter to you
Mhm.
is the most important thing of all. And there are just all of these almost unrelenting forces at work through all types of advertising and social media, promoting ways to spend money. There are lots of
Wow.
businesses designed to separate you from your money, and it's their job to make it look as enticing as possible. And it's our jobs as individuals to figure out what are the things that actually matter to us. And it does get at some of what we've talked about in terms of making purchases we regret and just sort of trying to learn from them.
Well, that is wonderful. I presume he didn't do a chapter on buying Freddie Mercury's stuff 30 years later.
He did not do a chapter on
Ah,
buying for
he should have
you're
spoke to me. Honestly,
you're
why didn't he tell me?
again, Emmett, I got so many text messages after your episode. Um, you're also not the only, person I've spoken with who likes to spend money on things related to music.
Oh, yeah.
Christine Benz, who's the director of personal finance at Morningstar, brilliant woman, talked about that she loves to spend money. She loves to splurge on going to concerts, going to live events, and sort of waiting last minute
Okay,
to buy
to get the
tickets on the
deal.
secondary market. And Bob Pisani, a longtime reporter for CNBC, loves memorabilia. We recorded the interview in his office, and I should have taken pictures of it because he had posters of Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones and
Wow,
all
how
these concerts.
cool.
So you're not alone in spending money on music memorabilia.
Chris, it has been a pleasure. Always is. Thank you so much for joining me on Stock Club, and please stay in touch.
My pleasure, Emmett. Thanks so much.